Welcome back to Faith, Power, and Emancipation. Faith, Power, and Emancipation. My name is Professor Januarius Asongu, and I am a philosopher, psychologist, theologian, educator, and author of this book, Faith, Power, and Emancipation, Liberative Realism, and the ethics of truth and freedom. Thank you for joining me in episode 4 of this our series. In our previous episode, we explored the relationship between truth and liberation. We discovered that freedom requires truth. Without truth, liberation becomes vulnerable to propaganda, manipulation, and ideology. Today, we move to another foundational question. Why does oppression matter? Why should we care about injustice? Why is the suffering of another human being morally significant? These questions bring us to chapter 3, Human Dignity and the Moral Foundations of Freedom. At first glance, the answer seems obvious. Human beings have dignity, therefore, oppression is wrong. But when we look more closely, the question becomes more difficult. What exactly is human dignity? Where does it come from? Why should anyone respect it? Modern societies often answer these questions by appealing to human rights. We hear constantly about civil rights, human rights, political rights, economic rights. But rights themselves require a foundation. Rights protect something. The question is, what exactly are they protecting? Why does every human being deserve rights in the first place? This chapter argues that rights make sense only if human beings possess intrinsic worth. And that intrinsic worth is what we call human dignity. For the Christian tradition, human dignity begins with one of the most profound statements in Scripture. The book of Genesis tells us that human beings are created in the image and likeness of God. This idea is known as the doctrine of Imago Dei, the image of God. According to this doctrine, human beings possess value not because of what they own, not because of their intelligence, not because of their race, not because of their nationality, not because of their political beliefs, and not because of their social status. They possess dignity because they bear the image of their Creator. This is one of the most revolutionary ideas in human history. Think about it. If every person bears the image of God, then every person possesses value. The rich and the poor, the strong and the weak, the educated and the uneducated, the citizen and the refugee, the ruler and the prisoner, every human being possesses dignity. This means that dignity is not something society gives us. It is something we already possess. Governments can recognize it, but they do not create it. Institutions can protect it, but they do not grant it. Political systems may respect it or they may violate it, but they cannot erase it. Human dignity exists before the state. Human dignity exists before political power. Human dignity exists because of God. This insight has profound implications for freedom. Why? Because if human beings possess intrinsic dignity, then they cannot be treated merely as tools. They cannot be reduced to instruments of political ambition. They cannot be sacrificed for ideological projects. They cannot be treated as disposable. Every system that dehumanizes people stands in opposition to this truth. This is why oppression is morally wrong. Oppression is not merely inefficient, it is not merely unfair, it is an assault upon the dignity of persons created in the image of God. Throughout history, oppressive systems have often attempted to deny the humanity of certain groups. Slaves depended upon denying the full humanity of slaves. Colonialism often depended upon denying full dignity to colonized people. Racism depends upon denying equal dignity to others. Authoritarianism or authoritarian systems depend upon reducing persons to instruments of power. Every form of oppression begins with dehumanization. Before people can be oppressed, they must first be treated as less than fully human. This is why the struggle for justice is fundamentally a struggle for human dignity. But the chapter also introduces an important caution. The recognition of dignity does not eliminate the realities of political conflict. Human beings remain imperfect, societies remain divided, political life remains complicated, and the great Christian thinker Augustine understands this well. Augustine argued that human beings possess a tendency towards domination. He called it the libido dominandi, the lust for power, the desire to dominate others. This temptation exists in every society. It exists in governments. It exists in institutions. It exists in movements. It exists within each of us. This means that freedom is always fragile. The problem is not simply that bad people gain power. The deeper problem is that power itself can corrupt. History repeatedly demonstrates this truth. Movements that began in the name of freedom have sometimes become oppressive. Revolutionaries have sometimes become dictators. Victims have sometimes become oppressors. Why does this happen? Because dignity must apply to everyone, not only to those we support, not only to those who agree with us, not only to those who belong to our community. Dignity, human dignity is universal, and this universality creates an important moral challenge. We must defend the rights of the oppressed. We must also refuse to dehumanize our opponents. Justice requires accountability, but it must never become vengeance. Liberation requires resistance, but it must never become hatred. This is one of the most difficult lessons of the Christian tradition. The person who oppresses others may be guilty. They may require restraint. They may require punishment, but they do not lose their humanity. The image of God remains. This insight protects liberations from becoming vengeance. It protects justice from becoming cruelty. It protects freedom from becoming domination. Another major theme in this chapter concerns the relationship between dignity and political authority. Governments are necessary. Societies require laws. Communities require institutions. Other matters. But political authority is not unlimited. Governments exist to serve human beings. Human beings do not exist to serve governments. The state exists for the protection of persons, not the other way round. Whenever political systems forget this truth, freedom becomes endangered. Power becomes an end in itself. Institutions begin serving themselves rather than the people, and dignity becomes subordinate to political interests. The doctrine of human dignity therefore establishes limits on political power. No government has the moral right to violate the intrinsic worth of persons. No ideology has the moral right to treat human beings as disposable. No movement has the moral right to sacrifice individuals for abstract goals. Human dignity establishes moral boundaries that power cannot legitimately cross. This principle lies at the heart of genuine freedom. Freedom is not simply the absence of restraint. Freedom is not merely the ability to do whatever we want. Freedom is the ability to flourish as persons created in the image of God. Freedom is connected to truth. Freedom is connected to dignity. Freedom is connected to responsibility. Freedom is connected to the common good. This broader understanding of freedom challenges many contemporary assumptions. Modern society, modern societies often emphasize individual choice. Choice matters, but freedom is more than choice. A society filled with choices can still be deeply unfree if dignity is denied. A society can possess elections and still oppress people. A society can proclaim liberty while treating human beings as commodities. True freedom requires more. It requires respect for human dignity. It requires institutions that protect dignity. It requires moral commitment that sustain dignity. This is why the doctrine of the image of God remains so important. It provides a foundation for freedom that political systems alone cannot provide. It reminds us that every person matters, every person possesses value, every person deserves respect, and every person deserves protection from domination. And as we conclude this episode, let us remember the central lesson of this chapter. Freedom rests upon dignity. Justice rests upon dignity. Human rights rest upon dignity. And dignity rests upon truth that every human being bears the image of God. When societies forget this truth, freedom becomes fragile. When societies remember it, freedom gains solid foundation. In our next episode, we move into part two of the book. We begin examining the nature of power itself. How has empire changed the modern world? What does domination look like in an age of globalization, technology, and digital networks? How should Christians respond? These are the questions we explore in chapter 4, Theology as Empire. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this episode, please click like, subscribe to the channel, and share this discussion with others. I also invite you to leave comments below. What do you think is the true foundation of human dignity? Can freedom survive if societies forget the inherent worth of every human being? I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Until next time, remember, every human being possesses dignity. Every human being bears the image of God, and every struggle for justice begins by recognizing that sacred truth. Thank you, and God bless you.